Hello everyone, James Williams. A very warm welcome to the show if you're just joining us. Now, we're hitting a topic. Now, if you are a parent and you have a few children, you should never have a favorite child. Here at MEF, we have 6 ecosystems, 6 product areas. Of course, I like them all, but I have to say, I do love the area of business messaging. And call me old, well, I am, I'm 51, but I've been in the world of business messaging for a long time. I've been in the SMS world for a long time. I love A2P SMS, application to person SMS, or application to peer SMS. And I love this topic. And this topic coming up now, sponsored by HAUD, is preserving the trust of A2P SMS. I love it. What can I say? Let's introduce the panel. We'll start with Joanna Kuligowska. Joanna, very warm welcome. Joanna, you're on mute. You're doing mind.
Has to happen. I mean, so many years we're online and it still happens. Good afternoon.
Lovely to have you with us. Could you just introduce yourself and then we'll introduce the other panelists and you can talk more about HAUD, what you do as well.
Yeah, sure. My name is Joanna Kuligowska. I work as Head of Global Market Intelligence at HAUD. So really working closely with our customers, mobile operators, the larger community, the ecosystem of business messaging to help mobile operators shape best practices for monetization and securitization of the messaging business.
Exactly. It's perfect method, monetization, so growth and security protection. That's perfect. Thank you very much. Next up, I'd like to introduce Mr. Waheed Adam. Hi, Waheed.
Hello, James. I've seen you moderate so much today. I'm wondering if your throat is not dry already. You still have a voice.
No, it's not. I was thinking in the previous one or in the gap, I was thinking, let's do a charity 24-hour or 48-hour event non-stop. I could do it. I really could. It's only 8 in a row today, Waheed. Only 8. There we go. But thank you for that. So lovely having you with us. If you just introduce yourself, who you are, other than being a MEF board member, you have a day job. And so what's that?
Yeah, I think the day job can be MEF, but yeah, I am also the executive chair of iTouch, and we are African-based, focus on the African continent largely, serve a lot of the international aggregators who want to serve or work in the African environment, but also locally serve a lot of the enterprise markets in the A2P messaging as well, and now providing also some security solutions around that.
Fantastic. And you are super active across the MEF community. You are always on our fraud and revenue assurance working groups, SMS commercial models, trusted messaging, other groups. So you're a perfect person to have here on this show and in this session in particular. So thank you, Waheed. Also like to introduce Pat Flynn. Hey, Pat. Hi.
Hi. Hi, guys.
Good to have you with us. So Pat Flynn, who is the Head of Business Development, co-founder of Neustar, but many of you will know Pat from the SMS industry. Pat has been with the industry from the beginning, it's fair to say. So you know just a little bit about SMS, but I'll leave you to introduce yourself, what you've been up to over the years, and what you think about this panel. Go for it.
Yeah, good to see you guys. And so I've been in SMS from back when the 10 Commandments came down and they were sent down on SMS. So I started with Vodafone. I co-founded Open Mind Networks. I worked with Anam, which is now Infobip, and I co-founded Neustar, which we focus on merchant ID, merchant legal identification. And I can just say, Joanna, there's a follically challenged panel, and Joanna, you've definitely got the best hair in this panel.
Hang on, we haven't finished yet. We've got another speaker.
One more.
We've got one more. We're going to see what Ron's hair is like. And will you be correct? We're going to press the button now, introduce Ron. No, he has hair. I'm sorry, Pat.
Odd one out, I feel.
And it's real. Yeah. Let's not do a Donald Trump and pull the hair because it's real hair. It's real hair. There we go. Fantastic. Yeah. Ron, right, it's real. Great to have you with us. Who are you?
It's great to be here.
What's your role with HAUD? Go for it.
Yeah, I'm the Vice President for Product and Pre-Sales at HAUD. Yeah, I've been here for many years now, around 6 years. Occupy different position within HAUD, but nowadays I'm in the commercial role. So I'm glad to be here. This is my first panel at MEF, so I hope for many more. And
fantastic. We will treat you
here,
gently. We're not. We have some speakers who've been on many, many, many panels indeed. But Joanna, thank you to HAUD for sponsoring this. I'll let you start this panel. What are we going to be talking about in the next few minutes, ultimately?
Yeah, maybe yeah, you can help me bringing the slides up, and then great. So yeah, welcome. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to have such a great panel of speakers today. So today's session, we want to focus on fraud and mainly spam and smishing and what can be done to prevent it. Just a few words about HAUD and what we do. So we are a global technology company. We build solutions focused on helping mobile operators to really capitalize on the vast opportunity of the messaging market while preserving the security and the trust of the MNO native messaging channels. And yeah, if I can just get the next, I can control them myself, isn't it? I'm not so familiar with hopping, sorry for that. Yeah, so if we look at despite the huge revenue opportunity that messaging business brings to all parts of the ecosystem, it faces a number of critical challenges. Some of these challenges were really widely spoken about this morning in very interesting sessions. And today in our session, we really want to focus around fraud and spam. So what we've seen is, the popularity of messaging channel has attracted these bad actors who are exploiting it for their own monetary gains at a huge expense of consumers, but also businesses, mobile network operators, and also the wider industry ecosystem. So what is a fact is that the level of attacks is growing exponentially. Here is just some statistics from Global State of Mobile Phishing Report. So you can see is the smishing attacks are growing exponentially, and this trend is continuing also this year in 2023 as we see it across the projects we serve globally. So if we look at the amount of spam messages that is being estimated, it's huge, yes, but if we would look at it from the revenue loss perspective, it's even harder to quantify. It's actually impossible to quantify how much money is lost to fraud, because it really goes beyond a monetary damage. Yes, it damages the it creates damage to the subscriber, it's damaging to the MNO, and it's also damaging to the industry and to the channel as a whole. And just a few reasons why, in our perception, we see that this has been happening. We've seen such a growth of these fraudulent messages. Is obviously, we have to face it. SMS remains the most trusted communication channel in the eyes of subscribers and consumers, while offering just unparalleled engagement. And because of that trust, the likelihood of people falling victim to scams is just much higher than, let's say, through email. Of course, SMS is not the only channel that is facing the fraud issue. Yes, we also see it on other channels such as WhatsApp, other channels, but it's still fundamentally the one that people trust the most. That if they receive an SMS from Royal Mail, they think it's Royal Mail. Yeah, from a consumer point of view. And of course, unsurprisingly, the most regulated industries are also very frequently targeted. So if we look at the industries that are targeted by fraud, this is insurance, banking, legal, healthcare, financial services that we are talking about. So really the ones that carry the most amount of sensitive personal information. And then mobile is great, but mobile is vulnerable. Because, we all have these mobile phones, and sense of urgency is personal, instant, and there's this urge of clicking on anything that's popping up on our screens. And that's really also in the combination with little to no separation these days between what's work and what's personal, really amplified by the bring your own device approach by many companies, and also really amplified by the digitalization that happened in COVID pandemic. Yeah, I think these are the factors that are really impacting the increase of fraud. And also we have to say, it's really easy to become a cyber criminal these days. The barrier to entry is really low. There is a availability of all the necessary toolkits you can buy on the internet to basically become a spammer or start smishing. And that's obviously with a really low barrier to entry.
And it's so open. Joanna, it's so open. I've got this LinkedIn group with 8,500 plus people on it, and I'm just shocked. I'm thinking, should I delete some of the messages on there? And I go, no, I won't, because it's just so open.
It is. It's very frightening. So everyone can become a cyber criminal these days. And I want to bring up as my last comment before I hand it over to Ron. We need to bring the wholesale aspect to it. We are at the wholesale event today, and we have to vocalize it. This is a revenue generating business, which in SMS strictly is being paid for. So spam and fraud might be still in some markets not regulated, being paid for, and revenue generating business. So that means from the industry perspective, there might be little or no incentive for certain companies to stop that. And that's quite important to mention. So I will hand it over to Ron. Yeah, I think, Ron, I will control slides for you because I don't know if you can do it.
Please, yes. Yeah, based on that, I mean, SMS is still being used, so we need to protect it, right? So we make sure that brands and enterprises keep using it. James, I'm not sure if this diagram is familiar to you.
Oh, I think it is. You've taken it and made it your own. You just used the MEF one. You could have made your life easier and just used it.
But I think our designer thought that he could
Our designer thought he can get a job in MEF.
So so basically, earlier you were discussing this as well, the 14 fraud types that MEF came up with. Yeah. So today in today's session, we are trying to focus, and so in essence, we have the same data that you have, and we want to target the consumer side. So we know that this is also something that who are we protecting? As Joanna mentioned, A2P is a messaging platform. It's still being used. Yes, there will be use cases potentially moving elsewhere, but we still need, because this will still be there, and there's still the need to secure the vulnerable people, I would like to call them, right? Like elderly people, like the children, and we will discuss this as we go along. So, Joanna, if you can go to the next slide. What are the main threats? So basically, I'm not gonna go what is spoofing and what is the rest, but here I want to show the major threats, right? These have been in the industry since I've been in it, so they're still there. But as we said here, I mean, now the barrier is lower, and people can become a fraudster easily. And to make things worse, there are generative AI tools now, so it's making our lives a bit more difficult as well. So spoofing, Joe, please next, smishing, and also malware. So these three threats, in my opinion, I think it's quite obvious that one leads to the other, right? So why spoofing? I can spoof a brand that you can trust, and then I can send you a URL, so I make it more familiar to you, and you can immediately click it because you trust that brand. You have that brand trust.
And Ron, that's a great thing. You mentioned the URL, because URLs, domain names, are so easy to get your hands on these days. There are literally very, very few checks, although I must admit I was at a domain name conference specifically in August, and certain countries such as the UK, there are more, let's say, hurdles to people being able to just buy 1,000 email domain names very similar to a well-known brand. But there are still plenty of countries around the world where there are no checks done on URL. So the URL is is a really, really easy one to get past at the moment, unfortunately.
I read some statistics on it. I don't know whether this is true or not, and for which market, that you can have a new URL popping out even every 20 seconds. I don't know what is the extra relevance of the market, but I mean, 20 seconds, that means that
you can. It's literally fished out there, done.
It's
just
very
hope to
quick.
hook one or two people, and then pulled, and then something else. It is. Yeah, it's that fast. Yeah.
Yeah, and on the subject, obviously, I will discuss this later as well. There's no solution that can fix every problem, right? So you need to have a framework kind of thing, right? So you have to deploy multiple solutions, and we're going to discuss this as well. And you discussed it earlier. I believe personally that collaboration here is key. So you need to bring all the players around the table and start contributing, because we cannot do it alone. Nobody can do this alone, right? So as we said, I mean, smishing URLs are coming up every minute, and you have to keep your system updated. Then on the other side, we are also saying to our clients, SID registration. Make sure that the brands have a proper SID registration process. Tied to it, you can have a URL registration, so you make it tighter as much as possible. But that doesn't mean that you are foolproof. So you have to add security enforcements, so we can discuss the solutions as we go along. So smishing, and then from smishing, as we all know, that there's threats of like malware and installation of these type of malware, what do you call them, ransomware, okay, stuff like this. And finally, there's also spam, right? So spam is also part of the big headaches that we have, especially where content is not available for filtering. I will stop here, but I will leave it on a note that here it shows, as well as Joanna mentioned earlier, that none of the actual channels are safeguarded, right? So you can receive spam, you can receive smishing on all the type of channels available at the moment, being end-to-end encrypted, being SMS. The SMS side of things, maybe you can have security tied to it, right? So you can protect it in a way. End-to-end encryption, this is a domain that we are still learning, and we're still together with the market industry players, we're trying to see how we can protect the vulnerable people, I'll call it again, from these type of attacks.
Thank you very much. Let's start to get real practical here. Pat, you're in Ireland. Waheed, you're in South Africa. Let's start with Pat. Over the years, you've mentioned you've been in the industry a long time, almost since, well, the first SMS was officially sent in the UK, December the 3rd, 1992, that we know. So there's been 30 years of SMS. You personally, as a mobile subscriber, Pat, what are you seeing in terms of the number of fraudulent messaging, perhaps dare I say even the quality of fraudulent messages, if you're receiving any? Have you seen that level decrease in Ireland from your mobile operator?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. Certainly over COVID, can you hear me, James?
We can hear you. Yeah, you just froze there visually, but you're back now. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Certainly over COVID, there's a huge increase in scams and so on, and it's decreased slightly. Now, what happened was the regulator in Ireland set up what they call a the word was nuisance communication industry task force. We're working with the three main operators in Ireland, and they brought in a number of technical solutions that you'd be familiar with, such as sender ID registry, blacklists, and so on. And the number of messages, and also, to be honest, say on Irish Twitter, I can see there's a huge amount of reporting of spam and scam messages. So there has been a decrease in the last 6 months, but I wouldn't say it's certainly better than it was about a year ago. But it shows the problem can be addressed at some level.
Yeah, but it's not perfect. It's not perfect at all. No. Pat, we've lost you. You're back. I think it's your connection. Waheed, if we come to you from the South African perspective, unfortunately, South Africa, for many years, when it came to direct carrier billing and other times, had the dubious honor of being at the top of the world in certain types of fraud. But can we say on the SMS side of things, the operators work in conjunction with parties such as yourselves, iTouch, and of course communities, whether it be MEF or WASPA, the Wireless Application Service Providers Association in South Africa, is the industry getting a handle on the situation in South Africa?
I think to Ron's point of the importance of collaboration. So although there's a number of efforts taking place and solutions coming in the play that could reduce and in some instances may do, there's not enough collaboration in the industry to kind of put it all together as a way to really combat fraud collectively. So I think that's one of the key issues, even though there's a lot more solutions around. Two is, in the last year, out of a report that just was recently released by SABRIC, which is the banking regulatory body, SIM swaps kind of reduced ever so slightly. So it was a slight reduction, but it's kind of showing signs that they're getting a handle on it. It's not dropping dramatically, but it's not getting much worse. But overall, I think this, the banking industry alone in the last year lost around 740 million rand. That's rands, in just a year, and that's just digital banking fraud, right? So we're not talking about any other sector in the marketplace itself. So it's still a big problem, and it's still rising overall. And as Ron said and Joanna said, you know, as time goes and technology improves, well, so does the fraudsters improve their style and ways to kind of break it.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, I've seen that at another MEF event where you have side by side text from a known brand, or what you think was a known brand, and the actual text in the message from the actual fraudulent one was written in a much better way than the actual genuine text. So
yeah. But the South African context of that is that for some reasons, and not that the networks are incapable of it, but we don't have sender IDs. So your message is received with a long code, right? So you don't even have to be spoofing, because I'm not going to remember a long code of a message I get from even a trusted source.
No.
So it becomes a lot more easier in that regard.
Fantastic. Joanna, let's talk about reputation and trust. We obviously know about financial damage from all these fraud types, but what about reputation and trust for brands? And that should ultimately be at the heart of it. I know from the SMS sender ID registry point of view, MEF runs the registry in the UK, in Spain and Ireland. And so we know that. But I know of, unfortunately, some brands in some sectors who, even though this issue is brought to their attention, they have no interest in really fixing it, because actually their customers are not you and I, the subscriber. Their customers are enterprises, for example, they deliver parcels on behalf of. How do we get this message literally across to brands of all shapes and sizes that the level of reputational damage is huge from business messaging fraud?
I think it's a very complex topic, James, because I think a lot of enterprises do not have that amount of knowledge how the wholesale ecosystem works. I think if I was not in this business,
we saw that with Twitter, didn't we? We saw that with Twitter in December. Yeah.
If I wasn't in this business for, I keep on saying 10 years, but I think it's been 13 since then. I would not understand the complexity of it. And from a brand perspective, let's look at Twitter. It's just easy to say, we blame the operator, for some fraudulent behavior. So, for instance, in this particular case about artificial traffic inflation, but when it comes to complex, reasonably complex situations such as having a sender ID potentially spoof, they might not necessarily understand how that can be achieved and why. They simply want their message to be delivered, yes or no, like the parcel to be delivered. And very often they don't have enough knowledge within the organization, and I don't blame them. It's just simply one more service that they use in the portfolio of their services. So it makes it incredibly challenging, because as an industry, ourselves, for instance, as a technology vendor, we don't talk to brands, so we don't very often have the opportunity to present to brands outside of this, let's say, larger OTTs and enterprises who are really very savvy in that sense. They understand the details and the complexity. Brands, they understand SMS should be simple and ubiquitous, and that should be delivered, and they don't necessarily understand that their messages can be manipulated. And then the subscriber very often will not blame the brand directly for this potential loss and potential damage. They will blame the operator. The first first organization a subscriber is going to call is going to be a mobile operator that delivered.
Yeah, you're right. Operators have a unique place. It's the same with direct carrier billing. If I have a charge which I don't know about, even though it's from a brand,
provider, don't you?
Yeah. Whereas if I buy something with MasterCard, I don't go to the mobile. I don't go to MasterCard. I go to the brand. So it's a unique position. Yeah.
It's a very unique position, and because they are trusted by the subscriber, and the subscribers have this perception, which I believe, it's probably justified to a certain extent, that operators should be protecting from that type of messaging. Now, just to put it in context, I mean, we spoke about South Africa, we spoke about Ireland. We see in some markets, the regulation does not allow, for instance, the operators to efficiently target the type of traffic. And these are the economies that are, the markets that are impacted the most by fraud, sadly. So, and the operators cannot do much, but they will still take the blame. But indirectly, the brand's trust will be eroded.
The audience, what you're talking about is regulators say to mobile operators, you're not allowed to inspect the content of,
for instance,
traffic, for example, coming through to be able to determine whether it's fraudulent or genuine.
Or you're not able to block on a P2P entry point, for instance, which is very often a Simbox entry point, which very often also generates a lot of that low quality spam messages or smishing messages in certain regions.
Yeah, perfect.
I mean, if I can add to that, you kind of talked about how do we get the corporates or the enterprises to kind of also take on some responsibility. Joanna, you mentioned education, and I totally agree with you. But then there's also the concept where enterprises demand the aggregator, for example, to have complete compliance to security solutions, etc. But they, in their own environment, can very quickly choose, because they can get it cheaper, by someone they haven't even tested for security, but it solves a budgetary problem within a particular division of that enterprise. So in that regard, they ask to blame when they decide to save a few cents and go on to an aggregator that cannot be trusted, for example, and maybe utilizing their data. And then, of course, it reaches the market. So as much as they need education in terms of the technology side, I don't think we need to teach them about the fact that they got to also make responsible decisions when it comes to the commercial side, right? You've all heard the saying, you pay peanuts, you get monkeys, right?
Yeah, I agree. And at the end of the day, it becomes about collaboration, but it's collaboration from mobile network operators within a country as well. And a simple idea could be to say, of course, mobile operators and anybody is allowed to charge what they want. No one is saying you've got to charge X, Y, or Z. That would be antitrust. But why couldn't there be something as simple as saying all the mobile operators come out together in a country, in the UK, in Netherlands, Spain, wherever it is, saying if you see an SMS price advertised to you less than X, i.e. less than the lowest price available from the operators in the country, then think twice. But we don't even see that anywhere. So there's a long way to go, Waheed. Pat, can we talk about regulation, please, and the topic? We've seen regulators come in hard, for example, in India with the TRA, the Telecoms Regulatory Authority in India, with the blockchain, the Tanlabat blockchain solution there. And it's had obviously a positive impact on the level of spam. It hasn't been perfect and positive. Where do you see the role of a telecoms regulator in this whole area of combating smishing and other types of SMS fraud? What should they be doing, but what shouldn't they be doing? Where would they be overreaching?
Yeah, well, let me just say, I think the regulators in the smaller markets are already moving. I mentioned Ireland there. Also in Estonia, the regulators taking a strong position with the CPaaS providers, the mobile operators, and the banking associations. And they actually, and this is, I found this really interesting, they can get a website blocked within a few minutes by information sharing. And I think the message to the industry is, if you don't do something, the regulator is going to do something. Well, particularly where the regulator can probably move more quickly in the smaller markets. I was listening to everybody on the panel and previous panels, James. I was trying to synopsize what can a company do really. And I had a sort of idea, like it's an acronym. It's like TIRES, TIRES. And there's the first part is technical detection of the issue. Then there's information sharing with other players. Let me just come back to that in a second. R is the regulator. So it's either the regulator is going to tell you to do something, or you should include the regulator and tell them you are doing something. E is education of consumers, which is, I think we all know, is key. But S is the speed. The speed of response really is a key issue here. And I think that's where individual efforts probably are lacking. But it's not. It's a sort of eat an elephant problem. How do you eat an elephant? A small piece at a time. But really, one thing I think is also, I know you mentioned earlier, but maybe MEF. And you didn't say MEF would have a database, but that we all wish we had a huge database that was kept up to date. I think individual companies need to find partners they can trust and start building islands of trust where information is shared. And that, at the very least, will start building a culture of enough trust to block these spammers and scammers.
Thank you. Ron, so we've talked about the landscape having changed with the scammers and the spammers that Pat was just been talking about getting more sophisticated. What are the new challenges, or should we say developing challenges, you at HAUD are particularly seeing? So your clients, particularly mobile operators, you're protecting. What are the newer things you are seeing coming out and you having to react to?
Good question. As we said, I mean, we're focusing today on smishing and spoofing, etc. Right? So AIT you discussed earlier, so that is thrashing. That's something that is always on the rise, and also now we're tackling flash calling as well. But to stick to the subject, I think spoofing is, and this SID registration is one thing that, as we described as well, Waheed was mentioning, for example, in South Africa, where we operate, we find this quite often that there's no standard registration process, for example. You know, we know that there are a lot of, like yourselves, James, you have this standard registration in UK and Ireland, right? This thing is good, right? It's a first step towards.
Exactly, it's a first step, Ron. It's not the silver bullet. It's not perfect. It's a first step. Yeah.
You know? So, correct. So even from ourselves, what we did is we came up with this 4 framework pillars. One of them is actually start with the SID registration, and then enforce it, right? So you need to have this in place, and then we can enforce it. Okay. So on top of that, then you should have something that I was very happy actually to hear coming out from the Mobile World Congress. Thank you, Joanna, for this. Is the operators opening up their networks, and you discussed this previously as well. It is very important that these the operators provide this data, right, to the brands to enhance. We call it basically what we have from our perspective. We call it enhanced checks. As I said earlier, the more checks you provide, the better the solution is, right? So what we have here, especially where we don't have clear content visibility, we have kind of confidential scoring, we call it, right? Number scoring. So we have like inputs towards our database where we can kind of have an algorithm stating the number legitimacy. Okay. So the 4 pillars are basically this, right, in order. So we said pre-register, and enforce. Then we have a detection mechanism based also on an AI algorithm. Okay. And what is also important, and I think as really Pat also mentioned a bit earlier, is to have this common database. So what we're trying to do is collaborate with other players in the industry to have this knowledge base, right? So starting from the URLs that are malicious, numbers which are invalid, ranges which are invalid, so on and so forth. So we, as much as possible, we want to protect not only the operator, as I mentioned earlier, but the customer, right? So we want to make sure that the customer is well protected.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a very, very interesting area, this area of A2P SMS, because when research is done on individual consumers and asked how many messages, SMS do you receive, for example, from businesses each month, they look at their phones, they go through, they may see something from their doctor, their dentist, or any other type of healthcare provider like that. Or it could be from their church, it could be another charity or anything like that. They don't view those as being business to consumer, as A2P messages. So correct. The actual impact could actually be much, much bigger than we feel, because SMS has developed that such amazing, comfortable position with consumers that this is why it's being used as the vehicle for so much of these fraud attempts.
With OTP and without OTP, I mean, this threat is there, right? So we were discussing OTP and stuff like that, but this threat is there. This channel is available for everyone. So the need to protect is very important, you know. And as we mentioned, the solution needs to be holistic, right? Starting from point A to point C, but including education. So we need to continue educating our all the chain. Something that we'd like to mention is, and we hinted towards it as well, is I want the regulators to be on the table as well. Right? The regulators should ask for vendors' opinion rather than come out with new regulations, right? Which, at the end of the day, who are they helping, right? Sometimes I feel like they give more, I don't know, a bit controversial here, right? It's more empowering the fraudster than the actual vendors to protect the people.
Because they don't know, Ron. And I've seen it personally where it just happens the regulator has the listens to the fraudster for a variety of reasons, shall we say. Yeah, exactly. So it's that education. I'm not saying, that's education process. So we need to collaborate together, starting from the regulatory, the boards. You're doing a good job, by the way, MEF, by bringing people together in these working groups, which I am part of as well, as you know. So these kind of activities that we need to have in this space if we want to succeed. I mean. And we want to succeed. Waheed, can I just talk about South Africa, because there's trust. We talked about trusted entities. There are perhaps no more two trusted groups of entities than mobile operators and banks. You look at loads of industries, and mobile operators and banks always come out at the top or somewhere near the top in terms of trusted industries and trusted providers. But I know in South Africa, there have been issues with the mobile operator blaming, it's not just South Africa, it's all over the world, but mobile operators perhaps blaming the banks blaming the mobile operators for an issue, and then people have got to step in, and this is where WASPA and the likes of MEF have been involved in the past as well. How do we stop these arguments, which aren't very constructive, with one party blaming another, and actually to step back and get objectivity that we all have a role to play to combat this?
Look, some of the roots of those relationships that don't gel well is, in essence, the MNOs have now become a competitor to the banking world in that they're starting to provide financial services. The banking world, on the other hand, are trying to protect their customer base because they're realizing that every customer of the bank is essentially a customer of the MNO. So that's kind of driving the MVNO market, where a lot of the banks are now starting to become providers of their own mobile services. So that's a bit of the context of why that relationship has also been a little bit challenging. But I think at the end of the day, both entities, both the MNOs as well as the banking industry, are now hurting their reputation by the mere fact that their customers are solely dependent on them to be protected. And that is failing. So from a reputational risk perspective, both entities are now struggling. And that's giving rise to the fact that, hold on, perhaps we need to collaborate, because ultimately it's hurting both of us. So more recent years, and perhaps post-COVID, there's been a lot more robust conversation between the two enterprises, and hopefully through that we'll see, a little bit of an improvement. As I said, some slight improvement. So maybe some of that's already beginning to work.
Fantastic.
But it's imperative.
I can't believe it. We're 3 minutes away from the close, folks. Our 45 minutes is going super fast. Pat, last word from yourself on the issue. What are we as an industry not doing right, and what could possibly be a semi-easy win, shall we say, that we're not doing today?
Yeah, I think maybe just individual relationships between companies might be a start. Similar, I think, to what HAUD we're talking about. Boiling the ocean, getting a massive database, is going to involve a lot of trust issues that won't always work. But I think individual companies working with other companies can at least get a step on the ladder and make a difference.
Fantastic.
James, can I answer that question as well?
Very, very quickly. I
want to say something that no one has mentioned, is that we're all trying to have the consumer must have a seamless experience, and we don't want to trouble the consumer at all. Right. But Verizon's recent data breach report showed that 74% of the breaches happened via the consumer themselves. So in my view, I was
about to end this. You stole my point. I was about to say that the consumers have a role to play. Subscribers have a role, and not be absolved.
Absolutely. And I think it's time that everyone stops thinking that we cannot bring the consumer in because you cannot trouble the consumer to take care, better care, other than just trying to feed information to educate. I think it's time we bring the consumer in, put technologies on the consumer's device as well, and that allows a more closed channel of communication that can be trusted, using things like encryption as well, and other methods of identifying device SIM and IMSI.
Well, there are specific mobile phone manufacturers doing exactly that, have their own encrypted phones and everything. So, Joanna, believe it or not, and Ron, closing remarks. We're a minute and a half away.
It's great to hear all those. I would like to add one more thing. I think channeling some things that were said in the other panels. We need to start calling out the fraudsters. We need to start calling out the bad guys. I mean, MEF has been doing great work with the code of conduct. I mean, with the fraud framework. But as an industry, we have an obligation to call out the fraudulent behaviors, and I think that could.
I think Joanna, what we've got to say is persistent, systematic fraudulent behavior. Because
exactly. I know it's not that easy. It's not that simple.
Out there has some fraudulent spam traffic somewhere in it. Doesn't matter how good, how big, how small. It's the persistent fraud. That's the persistent one. Yeah.
And that has to be persistently rooted out. And I think that will help our ecosystem as a whole.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much. It's been a really, really nice end. We've built up to this. We've talked a lot about messaging fraud. We've talked about practically every single type of messaging fraud. We've had MEF board members. We've had technology providers, mobile operators, the lot, since we started 4 hours, 20 minutes ago. So thank you very much to Waheed for joining us from South Africa. Pat, as always, a pleasure seeing you from Ireland. Ron, welcome, and your first MEF panel. You survived. Great contributions. Hope you enjoyed the experience. We look forward to seeing you at many more. And Joanna, thank you, and HAUD, for helping to sponsor this event. And please stay on for the rest of the show today and tomorrow.